Hello there, this is L24 News. I'm Abdurrahim Kasho and coming up next our program. U.S. health officials on Monday cut isolation restriction for Americans who catch the coronavirus from age to 5 to days and similarly shortened the time that close contact need to quarantine. For the first time since the start of the pandemic, Australia has reported over 10,000 daily new infections as the Omicron variant takes hold. Myanmar military fighting for its life in face unprecedented resistance to coup. India has moved to cut off foreign funding to a charity founded by Mother Teresa, saying that Catholic organization did not meet conditions under local laws. Libya's House of Representatives Parliament has proposed postponing the country's presidential elections by 6 months. Hello again and welcome. Those were today's headlines. First, Algeria and Mauritania has just signed cooperation agreements and memorandums understanding concerning several sectors on sideline of the state's visit to Algeria by Mauritanian President Mohammed Ould Sheikh Al Ghazouani. The signing ceremony, which took place at the Presidency of the Republic, was supervised by the President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune and his Mauritanian counterpart. This is a cooperation agreement in the field of higher education and scientific research, signed by the Minister of Sector Abdelbaki Ben Ziyan and his Mauritanian counterpart Mr. Amal Sid Ould Sheikh Abdullah. U.S. health officials have shared the recommended isolation time for people with symptomless COVID-19 from 10 to 5 days amid the surge in case. More with Zahra Farjani.
As the U.S. sees a surge in COVID cases due to the spread of the highly contagious Omicron variant, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention said that people who test positive for COVID-19 but have no symptoms should isolate for 5 days, down from the previous recommendation of 10 days. President Joe Biden on Monday said some U.S. hospitals could be overrun by COVID cases, but the country is generally well prepared to meet the latest surge and Americans need not panic.
As I said last week, Omicron is a source of concern, but it should not be a source of panic. If you're fully vaccinated, you get your booster shot, and you're highly protected. If you're unvaccinated, you're at a high risk of getting severely ill from COVID-19, being hospitalized, and in rare cases, even dying.
The agency also recommended that unvaccinated people or those who are more than 6 months out from their second dose and not yet boosted should quarantine for 5 days after exposure to the virus, followed by strict mask use for an additional 5 days.
America had made progress. Things are better. But we do know that with the rising cases, we still have tens of millions of unvaccinated people, and we're seeing hospitalizations rise. It means our hospitals in some places are going to get overrun, but in terms of equipment, both in terms of equipment and staff. That's why we stockpiled and pre-positioned millions of gowns, gloves, masks, and ventilators.
The sharp rise in cases has been fueled by the Omicron variant, which is now dominant in the U.S. Early studies suggest Omicron is milder but not contagious than other variants.
The United States announced that traveling between the U.S. and Southern Africa can resume on the 31st of December. The announcement takes place 1 month after the U.S. suspended all flights from the region following the announcement of the Omicron variant. South Africa, Mozambique, and Malawi are amongst the 8 countries that can resume traveling with the US after the 31st of December. England has recorded more than 98,000 new COVID-19 infections and over 8,000 people are in hospital with the virus in the country. And as the new year is approaching, Sajid Savid confirmed that England will not be forcing tighter restrictions before the new year. However, virologists criticized the decision, saying that it doesn't make sense for the United Kingdom nation to have different COVID measures. Omicron new variant is still invading the new world in general and Europe in specific. The critical situation of infections came for the second time during celebration of Christmas and ahead of the New Year evening. Governments are considering new restrictions in Europe in bid to face the next wave of this strain. Ayadi Usama.
Omicron variant of COVID-19 gloom over Christmas celebrations across Europe for the second year. The spread of the strain seems to have a similar impact on the current year as the previous one. In addition to the current measures taken by most European countries, governments are considering more restrictions to be added on the patchwork of lockdown. According to the last statement of the U.S. infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci, the situation is going to get worse before it gets better.
There are a few things. The one that would be immediate is to make sure, given the rapid spread of this extraordinary variant, that we don't get an overrun on hospitals, particularly in those regions in which you have a larger proportion of unvaccinated individuals.
Many European countries issued more restrictions on people, particularly during the celebrations of Christmas, and more will be applied for New Year's Eve celebrations. The assessment of the latest data concerning Omicron strain was further complicating matter for precaution against the infection. The lack of full data over the Christmas weekend made it more difficult to chart Omicron's course. Indications that Omicron might be a milder variant despite its extraordinary ability to infect people. Politicians were caught in bid over whether to spoil yet another party or play it safe to make sure healthcare systems don't collapse.
French Prime Minister Jean Castex new measure to curb the spread of Omicron following an exceptional cabinet meeting as the country experienced record numbers of positive cases and hospitalization. From January 3rd and for 3 weeks, coffee shops and bars will be allowed to serve seats customers only, and the delay before receiving a booster jab in France was brought down from 4 to 3 months. Greece announced further restriction effective to contain a further upsurge in COVID-19 infections, including the Omicron variant targeting mainly nighttime entertainment venues. As confirmed, new COVID-19 cases surged to a record of 9,284 on Monday, resulting in 66 deaths. In Australia, it can't now be revealed what caused a Sydney pathology lab to send hundreds of people incorrect COVID negative test results. The mistake were because of a data processing error. More with Nabil Khazini to know how this error has occurred.
A mistake in a Sydney lab caused hundreds of people in Australia to be told they had not COVID-19, when they in fact have had tested positive. New South Wales Prime Minister said the mistake which took place over the Christmas period was due to a data processing error.
Well, New South Wales and Victoria are finding it very difficult at the moment because of the pressure on the testing system, and a significant proportion of that are these tourism tests.
Results are taking even longer to come back, and in some cases the labs have got it wrong as the system buckles under the strain of tourism testing.
To be frank, this could have happened to any organisation. We're well beyond capacity, both on the ground and in the laboratories. The end-to-end process is very complex.
Some of those affected have expressed concern that they may have unknowingly infected their loved ones over Christmas.
I actually started having symptoms since yesterday night.
We've just got some contacts after Christmas Day.
SITPath, operated by St Vincent Hospital, confirmed it had said negative results to 950 additional people, when about half of them actually had the virus. Australia's most populous state, New South Wales, has confirmed the country's first death from the Omicron variant on Monday. Fresh restrictions went into force in the state, including a cap of 1 person per 2 square meters in restaurants and mandatory check-ins with QR codes in all hospitality venues.
30 million residents of the Chinese city Xi'an as cases rose for the fourth consecutive day. Chinese authorities announced that most cases of COVID-19 in country are infected with the Delta strain of the virus, and only a handful of cases reported are infected with the Omicron variant. In America, a single shooter killed 4 people, including 2 women, and injured 3 others, including police officer. The suspect drove a car and gradually shot a man before opening fire again in West Denver, neighboring where no one was injured, which ended with the police killing the suspect. Investigators are still trying to work out on a motive for such a criminal act.
Just before 6 o'clock this evening, Lakewood Police received a call of a shooting, shots fired at a business on the 1500 block of Kipling. The victim in that case was pronounced dead at the scene. We got a description of the car and the shooter. Just a little while later, here at the Belmar area behind us, Lakewood agents were able to identify that car. When they attempted to make contact with that driver, the driver opened fire on Lakewood agents.
More international news in this report by Zara Ferjani.
A powerful winter storm battered the western United States, dumping much-needed snow on the drought-parched mountains of California, causing travel misery over a wide area. 1 meter of snow had fallen in 24 hours on parts of the Sierra Nevada range, boosting the snowpack that feeds the region's reservoirs. According to Syrian state media, Zionist entity airstrike hit the Syrian port of Latakia on Tuesday, the second such attack on the facility this month. The Zionists carried out hundreds of airstrikes on Syrian territory since civil war started, targeting government positions as well as allies. Iran said nuclear talks that resumed in Vienna on Monday should focus on lifting sanctions on the Islamic Republic and seek to bring back the United States after it withdrew from the accord in 2018 under the President Donald Trump and began imposing sanctions on Iran. North Korea opened a key political conference Monday to review past projects and discuss new policies amid the pandemic and the diplomatic deadlock with the United States. The official Korean Central News Agency said Tuesday that the leader Kim Jong presided over plenary meeting of the Central Committee of the ruling Workers' Party. Jurors in Maxwell's sex crime trial ended their third full day of deliberations Monday without reaching a verdict in a case that could see the British socialist spend the rest of her life behind bars. Maxwell, who turned 60 on Christmas Day, is accused of recruiting and grooming young girls to be sexually abused by the late American financier Jeffrey Epstein. In Somalia, the president and prime minister clashed on Monday. President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed announced the suspension of the prime minister, accusing him of corruption. Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Rabel responded by ordering the Somali armed forces to be placed under his command.
Clashes in Myanmar conflict-torn Kaya state have forced over 5,000 people to escape to Mayasot, a Thai border town about 15 kilometers from where an attack is said to have taken place Thursday evening. Islam Seed.
At least 5,000 people fled to Thailand due to the intense clashes in Myanmar's torn conflict in Kaya state. According to Tak province governor, 5,358 villagers from Myanmar had crossed the Moi River to seek refuge on Thai grounds. Tak's provincial administration in Thailand called for residents to avoid the borders, as there has been reports of stray bullets and grenades from across the border in Mae Sot and Phop Phra district. The Border Consortium and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees urged Thai government to establish clear and regular screening procedures along the border area. They also insisted on Thai government to allow humanitarian organizations to helplessly screen arrivals from Myanmar to identify and support the most vulnerable groups, including separated and unaccompanied children, pregnant women, elderly and people with disabilities to seek asylum.
Thai government should stop pushing back people seeking refuge in Thailand or attempting to cross the border as their lives are in danger. Fighting, shelling and airstrike continue in Cayenne state, including the areas where people have fled. Any returns must be truly voluntary, based on informed consent and carried out in safety and dignity. We also urge the Thai government not to push people back to Myanmar because of COVID-19 outbreak. Trying to contain the pandemic is not just a justification for pushing people back to unsafe and dangerous situations.
Meanwhile, a few nurses in Myanmar are operating in secret clinics in the forest to help treat COVID-19 patients from among populations of displaced villagers and resistance fighters opposed to the military junta by using limited supplies and materials.
India's government has blocked Mother Teresa Missionaries of charity organization from receiving funds from abroad. Activists and critics says that the decision was evidence of further harassment of Christians. Rimzian.
The Indian government has frozen foreign funding of Mother Teresa's charitable organization, which was formed in Kolkata in 1950. The organization maintains shelter houses across India and received roughly $750 million in foreign financing in the years 2020 and 2021. However, the Indian Home Ministry declined to renew the charity's license to receive foreign money. The reason, according to the statement, was that the Foreign Contribution Regulatory Act's eligibility requirements were not met. The decision came after various right-wing Hindu organizations disrupted Christmas Mass in India over the weekend, and the Prime Minister had previously launched an investigation into the charity for allegedly forcing Hindus to convert to Christianity. Mamata Banerjee tweeted, "Shocked to hear that on Christmas, Union Ministry froze all bank accounts of Mother Teresa's missionaries of charity in India. Their 22,000 patients and employees have been left without food and medicines. While the law is paramount, humanitarian efforts must not be compromised." The move, according to critics, is just another example of the Hindu government's continued persecution of Christians and Indian religious minorities. India was actually designated as a country of special concern for religious freedom by the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom in 2020. And activists also claim that since Modi took office in 2014, religious minorities have witnessed more discrimination and violence. In a statement, the Missionaries of Charity said it ordered its centers not to utilize any foreign currency accounts until the problem is resolved.
People from Turkey's neighboring countries, Bulgaria and Greece, drove to Turkey for shopping. Turkey lira sinks encourage people to shop to the country looking for the good deals. Ayadi Osama.
The decline of Turkish lira in the previous days and up to the moment is still one of the biggest problems that Erdogan's government is facing. However, it is not an economic issue for citizens of the neighboring country, Bulgaria. Shoppers from Turkey's western bordering country, Bulgaria, are crossing the western borders of the country packed in cars and buses to take advantage of the economic situation that Turkey is living. The northwestern Turkish city Erdin was packed with tourists and shoppers from Bulgaria and Greece, as the sink of Turkish lira is a very significant reason for these people, especially during Christmas and ahead of New Year's Eve. Groceries, clothes and the majority of goods and products are the best bargain for shoppers in Turkey's loaded markets. People coming from Greece also took advantage of converting euros into lira. Turkish lira is witnessing a significantly high inflation, which reached roughly 21%. It mostly affected the prices of food, fuel, and household items. December was the most volatile month for Turkish lira. The Turkish currency declined almost every day to finally hit the all-time low of 20.04% against the euro on December 20th. The lira rebounded again as the Turkish president announced new financial tools to protect lira deposit against currency fluctuations and closed the week at 12.65 against the euro.
In Iraq's elections, the result paved the way for Muqtada Sadr, opposed both Iranian and American influence in Iraq, to decide the fate of the current Prime Minister, Mustafa al-Khadimi, who is backed by the United States. Sadri's party, the Sadrist movement, had the biggest election victory, winning 73 of the country's 329 seats. The result could mean negotiations on formation of new cabinet could officially begin and potentially the election of a new Prime Minister for the nation. Libya's House of Representatives Parliament has proposed postponing the country's presidential elections by 6 months. The Assembly held a session in the eastern city of Tobruk late Monday to discuss the polls, which were scheduled to take place on December 24th. Acting Parliament Speaker Fawzi Al-Naweri presented several proposals by deputies on the polls, one of which called for delaying the vote by 6 months. In Brazil, weeks of flooding have increased in Bahia state in the last 2 days after a pair of dams collapse caused at least 20 people to be killed, while teams of rescuers are trying to transport supplies and bring medical care to victims.
The floods hammering northern Brazil have killed at least 20 people and injured 358. Rescuers are braced for more rain in the coming days. The governor of Bahia State, Rui Castro, declared it the worst disaster in the state's history.
Unfortunately, we are living through the worst disaster that has ever occurred in the history of Bahia.
Houses were underwater and the streets turned into rivers in several municipalities in the south of the state. And heavy rainfall caused dams to burst and rivers to overflow at the weekend.
It's very sad to see our town like that. It's very sad. I've never seen something like this before.
The number of people who have been driven from their homes by the flooding has almost doubled. And now more than 60,000 citizens are homeless because of the natural disaster. Members of the Navy along with rescue workers drive boats to help transport people who left their homes, including some who escaped through second-floor windows.
I've received a lot of videos of people putting themselves at risk to save people. This strength, this unity for life will help us rebuild.
The heavy rainfall coincides with La Nina, a weather phenomenon that typically occurs every 3 to 5 years and leads to cooler Pacific Ocean temperatures than normal.
Chinese citizens alleged outline against billionaire Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk after a note sent to the United Nations revealed that some of the company's satellites nearly collided with China's space station on 2 separated occasions in 2021. China and Japan have agreed to establish a communications hotline between defense ministers after the two countries held a virtual bilateral talks yesterday evening.
In a statement, the Chinese Defense Ministry said that two sides will establish a direct telephone line under the sea and a liaison mechanism in a bid to build a constructive and stable bilateral relationship. The decision was made when Chinese State Councilor and Defense Minister General Wei Fang held video talks with Japanese Defense Minister Nobukishi late Monday. Pointing to the importance of Japan as China's neighbor and cooperative partner, we told the Japanese counterpart China will firmly safeguard its territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests. The statement comes amid tensions between the countries over disputed islets in the East China Sea. Next year marks the 50th anniversary of the normalization of diplomatic relations between China and Japan. The Chinese defense minister said the two sides should follow the important consensus reached by the leaders of the two countries to enhance strategic mutual trust, handle differences properly, and achieve win-win cooperation. The ministers discussed issues over the East China Sea, the disputed Senkaku, Diaoyu Island, Taiwan Strait, and other region issues in the meeting that lasted for about 2 hours. Kishi told reporters after the virtual meeting, since there are unresolved issues with China, we needed to try and keep having candid communication so we can promote exchanges and foster mutual understanding and confidence.
Russia's defense ministry announcement earlier that 10,000 troops deployed along the border with Ukraine will withdraw to their permanent bases did not ease the alarm of Western officials who sees a mounting risk of Russian military action.
After the announcement of withdrawal of troops from Ukrainian borders, the Russian President Vladimir Putin designated his country's willingness to sit down for talks with the United States and NATO. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Lavrov said in a televised interview that Moscow was still waiting for NATO's response to various conditions for talks to take place over security guarantees.
We have said that talks will only mean the direct involvement of the military.
The United States and its NATO allies have said they are willing to enter talks with Russia. Western diplomats have warned Russian security proposals are not acceptable in their current form.
Any dialogue with Russia must address NATO's and other concerns about Russia's continued threatening behavior and be based on the core principles and foundational documents of European security. We will not compromise the key principles on which European security is built, including that all countries have the right to decide their own foreign and security policy course free from outside interference.
Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba has been lobbying for Ukrainian officials to be able to participate in any security talks among the US, NATO, and Russia. On a statement on Twitter, he said, "We support the idea of the US, the EU, and NATO talking to Russia as long as the primary topic is ending the international armed conflict, Russia's war on Ukraine. Euro-Atlantic security is at stake in Ukraine, therefore Ukraine should be part of security consultation on the matter."
The Algerian national team arrived in Qatar yesterday at midnight after a 7-hour trip from Paris to Qatar. The Cubs of Belmadi will play 2 friendly matches against Gambia and Ghana on the 1st and the 5th of the next January in preparation for the African Cup of Nations, which will start in Cameroon on the 9th of the next month. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a reminder for our main stories. U.S. health officials on Monday cut isolation restriction for Americans who catch the coronavirus from 10 to 5 days and similarly shortened the time that close contacts need to quarantine. For the first time since the start of the pandemic, Australia has reported over 10,000 daily new infections as the Omicron variant takes hold. Myanmar military fighting for its life in face of unprecedented resistance to coup. India has moved to cut off foreign funding to a charity founded by Mother Teresa, saying that Catholic organization did not meet conditions under local laws. Libya's House of Representatives Parliament has proposed postponing the country's presidential elections by 6 months. That's all the news we have grasped for today's Bulletin. All 24 news programs. Stay tuned. We'll continue for the French and the Arabic version. Good night. See you.